For more than 20 years, day after day, Marshall Applewhite told his followers, I can be your shepherd. You can follow us, but you cannot stay here and follow us. Today, I'd like to inform you about Marshall Applewhite, one of America's most prominent cult leaders, who convinced 39 people to follow him in his belief that suicide was the only way to what he called the next level in life. Marshall Applewhite was a major wake-up call to society on just how convincing the words and antics of one man could be on so many people. The story of Marshall Applewhite has always fascinated me, and I've researched the history of his life and the events leading up to the tragedy in California back in 1997. Today, I'll provide a brief biography of Marshall Applewhite, review one of his most memorable speeches, and the effects and impact of that speech. But first, I'd like to talk a little about Marshall Applewhite's background. Marshall Applewhite was born in Spur, Texas in 1931. He was the son of a Presbyterian minister. He graduated high school from Corpus Christi, Texas in 1948. Applewhite briefly enrolled to study ministry, but eventually changed his mind and went into music. He did a brief stint in the U.S. Army Corps and was eventually hired as the choral director at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Applewhite married in the 60s and he had 2 children, but nearing his 40s, his battle with homosexuality was unraveling both his marriage and his academic career. After being admitted to a psychiatric hospital to cure his homosexuality, he began having heart trouble. After having what he described as a near-death experience when he was hospitalized for his heart, he was revived and fell into the thrall of a nurse named Bonnie Lou Nettles. Their relationship was not a romantic relationship, it was more of a spiritual friendship. They shared an interest in astrology and reincarnation. They dubbed themselves Bo and Peep, and Applewhite and Nettles founded the Christian Arts Center in Houston, blending the scriptures with the New Age philosophies. Believing they had the power of the prophecy, the two conceived themselves as the 2 witnesses from the New Testament's book of Revelation. In an event called the Demonstration, they envisioned themselves being assassinated by angry disbelievers and then arising from the dead and ascending to heaven in a cloud. And the cloud, to them, was a spacecraft that was going to come down and transport only a select group of people to a new life. Now that you know a little more about Marshall Applewhite's background, let's talk a little about one of his most memorable speeches. Applewhite's speech, titled The Last Chance, was his final plea and offer to people who wanted to go with him and continue on to before the destruction of the earth. In this speech, Applewhite solicits his followers to give up anything and everything human. No relationships of any kind were permitted, either outside or inside the group. He explained that all followers would become completely new individuals with new minds and new information from the next level generation. Followers were promised a place of beautiful beings, not of human form, where there would be no male or female gender. Applewhite actually castrated himself along with 5 of his followers to deter the sexual needs of a human. Applewhite's manner of speaking was almost eerily calm and mesmerizing. He was an angelic-looking man. He used no gimmicks or flashy presentations in his speeches. He's been compared to having the voice of that of Paul Harvey that just draws you in and makes you want to listen and want to believe. Applewhite gave his speeches as if he were offering you this chance of everlasting life beyond human form, and anyone who didn't take it wasn't scorned, and he never got angry, but it was rather pity. He never was aggressive in his speeches. He more was pleading and sympathetic to anyone who questioned or disbelieved him. Now that I've provided an overview on Marshall Applewhite's Last Chance speech, let's talk a little about the impact of that speech. The direct impact of the speech was 39 people dead, including himself, at a home in a wealthy neighborhood in California. Each of the 39 people wore the same clothing. They were all draped in purple death shrouds, and they had packed suitcases sitting next to them. They each wore a triangular patch on their sleeve, and at the top it said Heaven's Gate, and at the bottom it said Away Team. Authorities said there were 4 immaculately carried out death shifts. And the reason they had shifts was so the next group, each group could cover, and clean up after the group before them and cover them with the purple death shrouds. Applewhite had convinced these 38 people to mix phenobarbital and vodka and essentially a plastic bag for asphyxiation to end their lives. John 4:18 states, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear." Perhaps the love and devotion Applewhite's followers felt for him are what cast out the fear of taking their own lives. The purpose of my speech was to inform you about Marshall Applewhite, a well-known cult leader in history. Today I have provided a brief biography of Marshall Applewhite, analyzed his last chance speech, and described the impact of that speech. I'll leave you with one final thought. Today in Paris, there are over 200 people who still believe and follow Marshall Applewhite's teachings and are waiting for a spacecraft to come and take them to the next level. Thank you.